time is 11:35. The date is Tuesday, May 22nd, 2018. And we'll start with a roll call from my far right.
Sandy Kravitz.
Allison Beckham.
Pam Kirby.
Kim Hartman.
Barbara Perleberg. All board members are present. We do have a quorum. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, I just realized once again I forgot to make sure we're recording. We're good.
I got so good, and then today I forgot. All right, so we'll get started on our first action item, 3A, discussion and possible action regarding staff salary increases for fiscal year 2019. Dr. Creekard or Dr. Virgil, or both.
Well, I guess I would like to introduce Dr. Virgil. They don't know, it's a man who needs no introduction. But we'll tell you that I've been very pleased in my first week to have been able to work with Dr. Virgil and look at our budget and look at various options and be able to do for our employees, at least present to you a plan that would do for our employees what other districts around the valley are doing. Certainly what they deserve within the constraints of our fiscal situation and what is expected this year, and which would mean it would be consistent with what the governor is asking that we do and what he expects that we do. So we have a plan that Dr. Virgil will present and show you how we do it, and we're doing it, I think, probably similarly to what other districts are having to do with it. But it's been a joy, and I am very pleased to have you see this presentation and move forward, Dr. Virgil.
Madam President, governing board members, Dr. Creekard, good morning. A lot of this is going to look very similar to what we had last time, just a few changes, and I'll just let me just walk you through this, where we're at. This page remains the same. That was the background of where we're at this year. So there's no changes to that one. This one, the data is the same on this one, but what has changed on this was information that we gathered from the Auditor General's presentation at the ASBO meeting, and that is, if you look on the left half at the bottom where it has the FY18 base amount, that is as it was last time, and we used that 210.50 as the number to figure what was set aside, what the intent was for teacher pay. The Auditor General took the different approach, and that was to multiply each individual piece of that by the 1.25, and so you see those going out to the right, and so instead of 210, the 210.50 multiplied by the 1.25 is the 213.13. And so that increases the amount then of what the intent of the legislature was to get to the teacher salaries. So that has changed there, that we'll use the 213.13 instead of the 210.50. This page remains the same except for the audit number on the left-hand column under FY 2019. Remember I told you last time we had used the same number as FY18. We got an updated number for that, so we changed that. It doesn't really move the needle either way. It's a couple $1,000, so over 160 million. It doesn't change the picture much. And so that brings us to this page, and this one is similar to what you saw last time, except this one is specific It uses the 21313 figure that the Auditor General recommended to use. And this one is for the function 1000 only. As we talked last time, wanted to see the function 1000 only. The total number of FTE on that is 1,209, and you can see that what we have available would give the 6.63 on the new money from the state, and then you can see going down that if you add it up based on what you've already, on the left-hand column, based on what you've already given, that would come out to be a 10.09%. But that is just for the 1,000 function only.
Oh,
So is this, I'm sorry,
Board Member Hartman.
so this has changed from board book? Because I printed out what's on board book, and I feel like I'm looking at something that's slightly different.
This has not changed from what was sent to you Thursday afternoon.
Okay, I
This
just
is the
looked-
same
I didn't get
presentation
it. Board book now.
that was sent
I've got
out
this same
Thursday.
slide. I
Oh.
didn't get anything first.
I just printed this out this morning, so I have no idea.
What page? Do you have a page number?
I'm on page,
Are
Oh.
you on the other? the
you know what?
correspondence?
I'm seeing it now. So it's page 10 and 11. Gotcha.
10, right.
Okay.
Yeah, it's this-
All right.
Right.
Thank you.
Certainly. Then this sheet is basically the same setup, but instead of using the function 1,000 only, this is all the certified. So it's the certified salary schedule. The FTE on that is 1321. So the number increases because it includes everybody, just about everybody that's on the certified salary schedule. And you can see that the dollar amount that is set aside, this one has that the extra number off to the side, the 724,438, that to get to the amount for the 6.58%, which equals the 10%. So working it backwards from the 10% going up, to hit 10%, we need that amount from the new money to be the 6.58. To get that number to the 658, we've got to take what's available and then add 724,000 to that, and then that gets you to where you would be the equivalent of 10% of what the district is would be increasing what is paid to teachers by 10%.
Can I?
So, Board Member Kirby.
Okay, so thank you for these two scenarios. And I think one of our decision points as a board is to have a conversation around which group of teachers are we going to use as the base to deliver the increase to? Is it the function 1,000 or is it all certified?
Or both?
Or both, because one's inclusive of the other, right? My question is there, in both of these scenarios, there will be teachers who get, let's say we do deliver 10% on average. In both scenarios, there will be teachers that get more than 10% and teachers that get less than 10% because of the horizontal and because of the step 5 to 7, right? Not every teacher will get 10%,
Well,
but on average, they will.
I have a plan, we have a plan that will show all of them with 10% using this and going forward. So on this one, in and of itself, you're correct, there would be some that would not. And we can show where we include those later, and what it takes to get everybody to 10%.
So,
But you're right, on this one, you've got a portion of them that would not get the 10% if they weren't doing a horizontal move, for example. And so you'd have a range that it would come out to be an average of 10.
Right.
But it would be a range.
And remind me again, horizontal moves are for,
Professional development, for additional coursework.
so, and we have had years in the past where we've not given horizontal movement.
That is my understanding, yes.
So could a third scenario simply be, we just give 10%, we just raise the entire schedule by 10%? And the reason I say no horizontal moves, because then that's another $500,000 on top of that. I'm just saying, just raise the whole schedule by 10%. And every single teacher would get 10%. And it's simple, it's easy, clean. You have that too. Oh, okay. Well, I'm sorry. Please,
Don't
please
be
keep
sorry.
going.
Sounds pretty good.
That's good.
For the
Okay.
non-numbers people.
I understand where you're going with that.
But let Doug take this.
I will okay, I apologize.
A
sir.
catch
That's all
to
right.
that plan, however, is that you already approved the horizontal moves back on the April 3rd governing board meeting. So you would have to undo what you did.
Did we take action or just provide direction?
You took action. That was your minutes. I double-checked the minutes, and that was a vote, and that was a decision that you made.
That was was that when we didn't realize
yeah.
that some teachers wouldn't be getting a move because it was an additional step?
So
Which I don't think was
I guess the issue with doing it that way is you have to undo what you've already done, and there may be some difficulties in doing that.
Well, kind of
Challenges and
speaking of,
opportunities.
I'm going to jump in because we're talking about what we've already done. Because if we, I think, approved horizontal pay, we also, I believe, approved a 2.5% increase.
0.5% on the base, and then a step, which is 2%, the equivalent of
2% a step.
2% by giving a
Okay.
step.
And so my understanding at the time was that was partially what we found in the budget, maybe 1%, and then another 1% is what we anticipated realistically from the governor at that time, or from the state at that time. Is that correct?
Yes, those numbers were based on, at that time, the governor's proposal for the state budget and the Joint Legislative Budget Committee's proposal, and both of them were very close. Usually, when there's a big difference between the JLBC and the governor, that's where you get some sort of political compromise on where they end up. But normally, usually, when they both have the same proposal, or very, very close, that's what actually takes place. So you had the JLBC, I think, at 1.77%, and you had the governor at like 1.79. So you're pretty safe figuring
Right.
at that
Right.
rate, right.
But-
So that's where that decision was
Right,
made.
and so instead of that 1%, not in addition to, but instead of that 1%, it's now changed to a overall concept of 10%,
Yes,
correct?
correct.
Okay, so we still have, what I would understand is we have those additional dollars, and then we have that 1% that we had pulled from the budget, correct? And I guess what I was just trying to see is that broken down
Yes.
in what's presented today, those kind of two different amounts that we are getting from the state and that 1% that we had already
That we had already.
carved out?
Right, yes.
Okay, I just, that's why I'm not sure where I'm seeing
Okay.
that here. If-
All right.
Or you get into it. Okay.
That's fine. I think
All
we'll
right.
get there.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Great.
And this may have some of the answers that you were just, as far as what we already obligated.
Okay.
So these are the,
Can I just,
Board Member Hart.
so just one clarifying question, because I'm getting it now that you're walking through it. Because when I looked at it on my own, it wasn't necessarily labeled. So what you've really just walked us through on page 10 and page 11 was kind of scenario 1, which was using function 1000 only, and scenario 2, which is using, is it class site fund? But somehow we get to all certified?
the certified salary schedule, so that all of them, right, that the definition of a teacher by the classroom site fund definition as opposed to the 1,000 function definition.
Okay, and the difference being kind of, is it psychologists?
Librarians,
Librarian.
counselors, right.
Okay. So the difference 1209 and 1321 just being the difference,
Yes,
120-ish.
and the numbers and the
Okay, so
FTE.
that's the two scenarios so far, and you're about to walk us through a third scenario right now?
No, not a
Not
third
yet.
scenario, but the information that goes with both of those scenarios.
Okay.
As to what you have already obligated, so that we can get to what you then have available. So you've already obligated, and you can see the list, and that's the same as we went through last time. And so as you see what we've already spent, and then we get down to what's available, and then you can see the bottom line is how much that you have now available for the two options that we had. And that's the bottom line figure, the 3.4 million.
Board Member Beckham.
On that, what is board election $200,000 for?
You have in November, there will be a election of board members, and we have to pay for that.
And we pay $200,000 to who?
County probably.
So it's
Yes.
just a flat fee, $200,000 to
No,
the
it's not a
county?
flat fee. That's an estimate based on how they have charged us in the past, and that'll be the county elections. Will tell us how much we're gonna owe for that, for our portion of the printing and running the ballot stations and all the costs that are associated with an election.
Thank you.
And this is a general election, so that number is actually a little lower. When you do one in an off year, you pay a little bit more because you're not sharing some of the costs with other entities that are also have items on the ballot. So now we start on this page, and this has at the top of it was the bottom of the previous page, which shows that the total available for options.
Board Member Hartman.
Sorry, Dr. Burton, just one quick question. Can you remind us again what that 1.3 million reduction is again? I think you mentioned it on Tuesday evening. Previous page.
The personnel savings, that is reductions in staff that personnel made, plus changes in how they figured out how to staff specials. So the specials being like PE, art, music type specials in the elementary grades. And then because we've had we're down on enrollment, we're in decline on enrollment, fewer students should result in a need for fewer teachers. And it's not exactly a one-for-one correlation because it depends what you're doing with class sizes and staffing levels. But anyway, combined, HR sat down and worked through that, and based on the positions that they have eliminated, that's the dollar amount of those savings of those personnel changes.
Okay. And have you looked through those to be comfortable with that they're appropriate? And had conversations, I guess?
Well, appropriate in the terms of that dollar amount being a reasonably accurate value of what we're going to get in savings, yes. As far as appropriate in, is that appropriately staffed? No.
Okay.
That's not my expertise.
So school staffing generally goes out in February, and the principals look at that, determine whether that's appropriate for what they expect their projected enrollment will be, and ask for additions or ask for adjustments at that time. So that is a process that was done through the spring. And there may be a couple of individual staffing issues still out there. Somebody says, I really need a halftime music teacher or whatever, but contingency is built into that staffing allocation too, so all of that continues on during the spring, and actually till students show up in August, and some adjustments are made sometimes at that time, but this process for that staffing has been going on for months at this point.
So, yeah, I realize it's not a one-for-one, but what I should be comparing, the context I should use for that is the 22,183 students this year and the 26,000. No, that's
No,
weighted.
that's weighted.
I'm looking for 18 and 19. ADM
Right there,
comparison.
21.9.
It's this one, what you just said,
22.
compared to, sorry, that one.
So 22,183 to 21,984, so that's a difference of about 200 students. And
That's ADM, that's not enrollment.
Well, it's still an apples to apples comparison,
Right,
right? So it's roughly 200 students. However, 1.3 million would be a roughly 26 teachers. So 200 students, 26 teachers. Does that sound right to you, Dr. Nance?
I think the,
It's just, if you're looking at just teachers, yeah.
Or Member Kirby?
Well, and
That just sounds disproportionate,
the
though.
other thing, though, you have
200
to,
students,
you're,
26
but you're
teachers.
assuming that this current year that we're in, 17, 18, was spot-on accurate teachers to students. I think, because we're assuming that we're going in with a proportionate teachers to students, and I don't know that we ever have.
Well, I'm looking to Dr. Nance to answer.
I mean, I can give you, there are other examples other than actual numbers of teachers. For example, we were able to, by attrition, change some of the elementary assistant principal positions to dean positions. We eliminated the director of professional development position. And there are other examples in different departments across the district as to where that $1.3 million came from.
Yeah, I guess I'm just being sensitive because, and I realize it's not easy, but there's 200 students and 26 teachers, so it seems like disproportionate. And I just get sensitive when I hear an example, and I realize it's just an example, but we're specials because the community may hear something
Well, I mean,
very different
Dr.
here.
Virgil, you can speak to what kind of dollars 200 students brings into the district, and what that equates to.
Well, I'm not interested in the number piece. I'm interested in the fidelity of the classroom. Because if it's 200 students, you would think that's the equivalent of roughly 10 classrooms.
Sure.
And it's 26 positions, so.
I don't know where that 26 is.
Well, I'm just taking that 1.3 million divided by 50,000, saying it's about 26 positions, roughly.
If you were just talking about teachers,
Right.
but we aren't.
Okay, that's what I'm trying to get to. What are we talking about?
Well, again, we're talking about administrative positions, we're talking about classified positions across the board. I mean, each department had areas that they were responsible to find savings in. I mean, I can only speak to my area, and we reduced director of professional development. We reduced one of our teacher on assignment coaching positions. And I know that schools looked at their administrative positions, and some of those changed from either assistant principals to deans or full-time to half-time. I know there's many other examples in the district, but I can't speak to all those.
And I would also say, correct me if I'm wrong, but ADM doesn't necessarily translate to 200 students. It's a weighted number, so it's.
I took the pre-weighted number just to
Oh,
kind of
okay.
get apples to apples.
All right.
I agree with you.
Good, yeah.
I mean, should that be something we should just take a look at what those
Sure, HR
1.3?
put something together on that.
Okay.
Board Member Beckham?
I am along the same lines with Board Member Hartman, of that where is that $1.3 million coming from? I understand you come up with the number, but you had to have had the input. It sounds like a couple came from Dr. Nance, some came from HR. There has to be something that would show what that 1.3 equates to. Because I thought we reduced the deans, so we did additional dean
Little.
reduction in this coming up year, like we did the year before.
Correct.
Okay, so I would think to have a confirmation of making sure what that number is. Did you have a list of what the reductions were, and then you came up with the 1.3 million? Or how
No,
did the
HR gave me,
They gave you
based
the-
on, right, based on what the positions they eliminated, and they gave me the dollar amount of what they had reduced that out.
Well, given the turmoil we've had in HR in the springtime, I would like to maybe go back to that number and make sure that it is correct.
That should be a simple form that they have on
Yeah.
file that they presented to him that we can
Great.
recreate and send out.
Can we get it today while we're looking at this? Just because I think is there action items today?
There's action regarding the salary increase. I mean, we're not actually approving the budget.
With the increase.
Correct me if I'm wrong, that's my understanding.
Does the 1.3,
Yes.
does the 1.3 factor into this second option you're going to give us also?
Yeah.
Okay. I just
Yes, the
didn't confirm.
1.3 factors into
Everything.
everything, right.
Okay.
So, again, the 1.3 is a number that reflects a staffing allocation for next school year. Those staffing allocations have been sent to all of the departments and schools, and they have staffed next year accordingly. So they know what that is and what the new number is, the compilation of all the various changes that Dr. Nance talked about. So I guess I would say to you, that's a real number, that's a usable number, and if we were doing something drastic with specials or class size, you would have, I would assume, you would have heard about that, and principals would have been, when I met with principals, there was no concern about that class sizes were being increased and that services were being, like specials, were being reduced. I guess I would tell you that having gone through this process for many years with districts, this is a common practice across districts, and getting to this point of near budget approval, those are accepted numbers. But we will get you that. I'm just telling you where I am, but we will get you that so you can see that, and we'll ask for that, and they'll find that in soon. I'm not so sure that we could do that today without somebody running over there and seeing what they have, calling HR and.
We can try.
Continue on.
Continue on.
Okay, so that brings us to what you've got available for the options, and then the options that are available here. And what we recommended as far as what we felt was a good match of what we wanted to do with the teachers, and that was to go with the 10% total for all the certified salary, as opposed to just the function 1,000, and so that would be the $4,738,767. And then on the 1% salary increase for certified, that's what 1% cost. You mentioned the horizontal move at $550,000, that some get that, some won't, and that would be after the fact, so to speak, of contracts amounts being done, because they would bring in their transcripts or grade reports and show where they had completed the coursework over the summer, and then that would be adjusted later. So with the goal being that, because what a teacher will do, a teacher will take this year's contract at $50,000 and look at next year's contract and think, okay, I should have gotten 10%, and that would be another $5,000. They'll do the simple math of 10%, and then they'll look at that, and it will either equal that or it won't. And if it's less than that, then they'll feel that something's wrong, that they didn't get the 10%. So in order to do that, you would have to add the extra $550,000 in. $550,000 as a percentage of 1% is about 3/4 of 1%. So if you were to take, and it actually comes out to 0.76, so if you were to add 0.76 to that 6.58, then that would give you a 7.34 overall increase to the salary schedule. And then if you were to, and so if you were to increase 6.58 to 7.34, in addition to what has already been done, then every teacher, almost every teacher, and I'll cover the exceptions in just a second, almost every teacher, when they looked at their contract, would see a 10% difference between the contract they had for 18 and the contract they have for 19, assuming they're, you know, on the same, you know, that they're comparing apples to apples. So that adds $550,000 to it. A 2% increase for classified, so that's $496,790. A 1% salary increase for administration. The classified salary study implementation. On security personnel, they had requested 5. If we fund 4, that's $100,000. Because we're increasing the classified salary by 2%, not recommended to give the personnel, the security personnel, an additional 1%. The bus driver incentive at $40,000 to do the bus driver salary increase so that we can get competitive on attracting bus drivers at $142,000. So if you add all those together, that comes out to $6,804,901. So,
Doctor, before you go on the 1% salary increases for certified, classified, and administrative, does that include benefits?
yes, that number does.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Board Member Becker.
Can you explain what classified salary study implementation is?
The classified salary study implementation, that was a number of classified positions that are, their placement on the salary schedule is not competitive with the rest of the market to try and draw those people in. So they identified a number of positions that needed moved on the salary schedule so that that position gets moved to another higher level on the salary schedule so that we can remain competitive for those positions. So it wasn't every position, it was those positions that had been identified from a study that HR did as far as where we were competitive and where we were not.
And so this is for, this implementation is for existing employees to bump them up because when you're hiring new people, they're bumped up higher and then they'd be too close to each other?
It would be both. For the positions that are open, that are unfilled, it would increase the amount to offer that position, and that should draw somebody in to apply for that. And for those who are in the position, it would also bump up theirs so that we keep them.
Okay. And is the, I guess, it's not for all classified, it's just for designated areas in which they needed to have an incentive?
Correct. It is not for all classified. It is only for those identified positions where we were below market rates on what we were paying.
Thank you.
Okay, Board Member Hartman.
Thank you. So does that include, so those are market adjustments. Does that also include a minimum wage adjustments and the impact?
You've already done that
Which one was that in?
over here on our already obligated page.
That was previous pages, already obligated.
Right. We
Classified minimum wage increased 75,000.
right.
Okay.
Right. We factored the right. The minimum wage goes up in January of 19, and so we factored in 6 months of that higher wage.
Okay. Does that have a ripple effect though? Because it bumps up, you know, the lowest, then the next layer needs to be bumped up.
It will ultimately. We did not address it as far as increasing other things now in this, but ultimately it will. At some point, you'll have to address the issue that as you've gone from 10 to 12, you'll have to take a look at where those people are, and so may have to do another salary study going forward to take a look at that as that number comes up.
Okay. Do we have a sense for how big that is? Just wondering.
Say again?
Do we have a sense for how significant that is, the dollar size of that?
The dollar size of?
When we do the minimum wage increase in January of 2019, the ripple effect, to the next level, we,
No, we know what, we have an estimate for what the increase in the minimum wage will cost. As far as the ripple effect, I think what you would want to do on that would be another classified study and verify where you're at on those. Because some of them, they'll change to differing amounts. So I think you'd want to do an independent study, just as they did prior for the one that we're talking about implementing. I think you'd want to do another one of those and see what that impact was and what positions need to move and what positions you'll be okay at.
okay. All right. Thank you. Just a question on this, where it's the 1% certified classified admin. Is this really for illustrative purposes? Is this saying, for example, certified 1% is 720,000, and that's baked into the 4.7 million above it? I mean, I'm not supposed to be adding this up, am I?
You're right.
Okay.
Yeah, those are not added, those are for information.
Right, those are not added, those are for information.
Board Member Kirby?
So what was when you were presenting, you said the total is 6,804,901. What does that total represent?
That total represents the 6.58 certified salary increase. And then it also represents, as I was explaining, that additional 550 to make up for that horizontal move, which is another 0.76. So the certified salary increase would actually be a 7.34% to the overall schedule. And then it includes a 2% increase for the classified, which is 2 times the 248,000 number, which is 496,790. It includes 1% salary increase for administration. It includes the $580,000 classified salary study implementation. It includes 4 additional security personnel at $100,000. It includes the bus driver incentive at $40,000, and it includes the bus driver salary increase at $142,000. And so when you add all those up, that's where you get the $6,804,901.
Thank you.
Thanks. And I'm sorry, Dr. Berger, where is that 6,804,000? I'm sorry, is that the next page? I'm just
No.
I think they just did it verbally.
Oh, there's,
Right, it's not in there. That's and I, in hindsight, maybe I should have put it in there, but I didn't put it in as a option because I just listed the different options in the event you want to choose a different set of options. We can figure those, so that number is not in there.
Board Member Kirby?
Okay, so Dr. Virgil, going back to the 6.58, I just want to make sure I understand. Certified salary increase, 4,738,000, which is, and then you add 550,000 for the horizontal movement, and that's the two of those combined is a 7.34% to the overall schedule.
Yes.
Okay, and then where does the rest, the balance of 10 to 10%, where does that come in?
Is
it the step?
The step at 2%, and we already raised the base schedule a 0.5%.
In the prop 1, 2, 3.
do you think afterwards we could get a summary so that it really does say,
Yes.
what the choices we are that's selected so that we could actually codify what we agree
Here's-
to?
here's-
Because it is confusing.
All right, so here's where I'm not tracking. I don't understand how the 6.58% certified salary increase plus horizontal movement, which is only just a subset of teachers, it's not the
It's not the
whole
whole
base,
teacher.
it's just a few teachers, plus a 2% step, which is, again, isn't every teacher, it's a subset of teachers. I don't understand how all of that translates into a 10% salary increase for all teachers. And it doesn't, right?
Well, the 550, you're duplicating the 550 because you already gave the 550 for the horizontal movement. So we're not changing that. We're adding an additional 550, the equivalent of that,
Oh, okay.
which is the .76.
So that's for teachers who, sorry,
And
I'm
then
jumping.
and that's what gets it to 7.34.
And where is that additional 550 going?
Going to whom?
How are we doing that?
You're doing that, you're going to increase the salary schedule by 7.34% instead of 6.58%.
But who's, oh, sorry.
But everybody would get it then. Everyone gets the 7.34%.
Correct.
It's just
Board member
coincidental
Kravitz.
that the 550 is.
It's the same as the
Same
horizontal.
number as
It's
the
the same
horizontal
number as the
movement. That's just
horizontal move,
coincidental.
that's right.
So
Okay,
people have
'cause I
already
was
gotten
assuming
the
it was
horizontal movement.
Well, we
We'll
just
get it
approved
again, or is this
Yeah.
directed to teachers who didn't benefit from the horizontal movement? Because they were maxed out on their steps?
Those who get the horizontal movement would get the 10% and the horizontal movement.
For coursework.
Those who don't get the horizontal movement just get the 10%.
Correct.
No, that math, I
But
don't see
wait,
how that math
hold
would
on,
work.
because I'm
actually.
trying to understand this. So we've already given a step to some teachers just because of where they are on the salary schedule. But there are some teachers that didn't benefit from it because they were maxed out.
Well, and I'll address that.
Because I'm more interested in the teachers that didn't, that were maxed out and
Right.
didn't, and they were maxed out last year and didn't get anything.
Right.
So they were penalized 2 years in a row.
Right.
So I'm trying to find somewhere where we can
We'll do that.
He's doing
do
it.
that. Okay, thank you. Just want to get it out there.
Yeah.
Thank
All
you.
right.
Yeah, make sure.
Okay,
I'm done.
Okay.
let's go forward for now.
Well, take them in order here. Ms. Kirby, your concern on the 550, do you understand how that translates into an additional .76 on the salary schedule? So instead of 6.58, it becomes 7.34. That lifts up the entire schedule. And so so we're duplicating, and we match the 550. It's not horizontal
Yeah.
move, it's
And-
to raise the entire schedule.
and is
But we
that-
match that to take away the fact that not everybody gets the horizontal move, because not everybody's going to go to and get additional coursework.
You're just taking horizontal movement completely out of the 10%, is what I'm hearing you say.
That is correct.
You're not including
That
that to
is
get to
correct.
the 10%.
Right.
So, when we went through this, you said 4,738 plus the 550, plus a 2% step, and you said plus a 0.5% base schedule
Right.
increase. So is that 0.5% yet another,
We already did the 0.5%.
when did we do that?
April.
We did that on April 3rd.
Okay,
So
but it is,
That's our 2.5% raise that we already approved.
Yes, the step and the 0.5% to the schedule.
Gotcha.
Yes.
And I guess, because I'm gonna jump in, because that's where I'm struggling to see that, we already had a budget in mind, basically. We had a picture that we had, 2.5% was there. The new dollars that were, obviously has changed from the state that we expected.
right.
Some of those dollars we had already spent and put into that picture that we had already established. But then there's all these additional dollars. And I guess where I get a little concerned is seeing the already obligated amounts. I kind of want to make sure that those aren't things that we already had to have built into that first budget scenario before the increase in the percentage raise. Like the SRO increase, I guess is a question. I'm assuming the 64,000, that's just on top of what we already pay. But I would think that had already been built in, that wouldn't come out of the new bucket of money is coming from the state.
Can I,
And the board election too, to me, that would have already been in the first round budget.
Right.
And I guess that's just where I want to make sure that we really do establish, here are these new dollars that came in, and this is where they went, not to things we had already obligate ourselves to pay. But Board Member Kirby.
I think I know what you're trying to say. Let me try to say it a different way.
Cool.
Back in April, we, as a board, said we wanted to give 2.5% to teachers. And then we talked about whatever we get from the state, we flow through the teachers. We talked about that. What's changed from then to now is we didn't get 10% worth of new dollars from the state to flow through the teachers. So whatever we got was, what was, like 5.5%, something like that, 6%?
Approximately,
Yeah.
right.
So we're having to self-fund 4% to get to that 10% out of our own budget. That's a change, at least for me, from April until now. And so I don't, if we want to talk about, do we want to do essentially 12.5%, which is self-fund the original 2.5 that we talked about, and then figure out how to go get 10%? Or do we want to roll that 2.5 into and make it part of the 10, since we're self-funding so much?
So then we supplement with 7.5%.
Right.
Yeah.
And the 2.5 that we have for a total of 10.
10, right. It's-
Sort of, yeah. I
that
mean,
equals
I
9.5.
think it's unrealistic of us to, I mean, we already had, a part of that 2.5% was already money we expected to get an increase from the state. So that was kind of already built into that. I think we all love the idea of getting to that 10%, but yes, we have to include the dollars that we'd already put in. I guess I just don't want to include dollars that had to be already built into the budget, not necessarily an increase from the state, but just had to be built into our budget. I'd hate to include that and take that away from that bucket that we'd like to all see flowed into to teachers.
Okay,
Does that make
so let me
sense?
refer you
Okay.
back to this slide. And already obligated, and those are all the things that we've already done. We did the health benefits, we added the step, the 0.5% to the salary schedule, the board election, the Arizona State retirement, the horizontal move, changing from starting step from 5 to 7, the SRO, the classified minimum wage increase, custodial contact increase, fuel cost increase. We added all that up that we've already, that we're either we already obligated ourselves or we don't have an option because we have to pay it anyway, like ASRS and the minimum. And all that adds up to the 3.7 million. And then we had some savings from the personnel. So you take that away from, right, from what you've obligated. And so that gives you a total of that you've already obligated of 2.49 million. Then we take what's available, and that goes back to the revenue spreadsheet in the beginning, the difference between FY18 and FY19. If we go back to that sheet, and that we've got an increase of 5.9 million. So the 5.9 that we have available, minus the 2.49 that we've already obligated, gives us an additional 3.4 million that's available for other things. And so what I just outlined was 6.8 million, and you have 3.4 million to pay for it. So then the question becomes, how do you pay for the additional $3,375,555? That ends the question of, okay, how do we do that? In the budget this year, and in the planning of just carrying forward what we've done in the new budget, you have carried a $5 million unallocated balance in your M&O budget, so that they're in the budget that you adopted for fiscal year 18, this current year, there was $5 million unallocated dollars, which are going to be part of your carry forward in the budget. Do you need a $5 million unallocated amount? And I believe the answer to that is no, you don't need that much of a cushion, so to speak. So if you were to pay the $3,375,000, then you would still have $1.62 million as unallocated in your M&O budget.
Yeah, but.
Board Member Kirby?
Yes, but if we experience an enrollment decline that's steeper than what is forecasted here, ADM decline, how do we offset that revenue shortfall?
So if that revenue shortfall is greater than the 1.6 million, and that's why you have a $41 million reserve.
Okay.
And what you could do with that is you could simply take in journal entry some of your M&O expenses and move those expenses into one of those other funds, such as indirect cost or Medicaid reimbursement, and take those expenses out of your M&O so that your M&O is still balanced out.
Okay, thank you.
Board Member Beckham?
And so the next year, assuming everything is the same, we'll still need to come up with $3.4 million again, because that $5 million is not a sustainable revenue source that we are
Next
using.
year, next year
Granted,
you'll have this built in.
You could say you'd have that
It'll be built
1.6
in.
million.
Well, you'll have this built in, so your expenses are built in, but your revenue, they put this in the base, so your revenue is also built in.
I think that 5 million is recurring in our budget, as long as our enrollment doesn't drop.
Right,
As long as
It's not
the-
one-time money.
Oh, okay.
right. So yes, the expenses are built in, but so's the revenue built in, because it's part of your base amount going
Okay.
forward. And, you know, next year's another year. I think there's gonna be a couple of different issues that you're gonna have to face next year. But, you know, that's next year's discussion. You know, as far as what the governor and the legislature does and how they consider what 5% is and how they spend that to the public, I think is going to be an interesting scenario. But you want to balance this year's budget and you want to pay for this year's budget in a sustainable manner. And this does that, and we'll worry about next year. Because you can't get caught up in the let's plan 2-3 years out. You can't do it. There's too many variables with the legislature.
With the exception of, the one thing that Dr. Virgil sent me a webinar link, ASBO, I think, and ASBA maybe put it together. And in that webinar link, they emphasized over and over and over that whatever teacher group we decide, this board decides this year to give the pay increase to, we should strongly consider keeping that consistent for the next 2 years, to keep the group that's affected and to not start changing along the way. And so that is one decision point that I do think we need to talk about and be clear on, that is almost a 3-year decision. Which teacher group do we give this pay raise to?
I would agree.
And I don't disagree with what you've done, I'm just making that point, because it had not occurred to me until I listened to that webinar of how important that was for clarity and transparency going forward.
Are you talking about the group 1,000 function only or certified staff? That's the two choices, right? Board Member Beckham?
So can you help me? I am coming up 0.5 short. So I understand the 7.43%, which is the 4.7 million plus the additional 550,000.
734.
So you come up with 7.34?
Yeah.
Oh, well, that's even a little lower, sorry, 3.4. Because then I added to that what we approved on April, which was the 2% increase, correct?
Yes, right.
Plus
When
the
right, if you add the
0.5.
734 and the 0.5 and the 2, you'll actually come to 784 because of some of the rounding and where we did the numbers. And what we'll do is, if you want to do the 10%, we'll nail the 10% exact.
Oh, okay, so I am coming up short, but you know that.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, so
And
so
that's
it's
just,
missing about a 0.5.
Right, that's the, that's part of the whole issue with trying to do this with the different teachers, is that every time you take a different approach, you slice the pie different. And you can never get it to come out exactly the same every time you make another slice. And that's part of that
Okay, gives you a little
rounding
cushion there.
issue.
Can I just bring up one thing for you? Also, on April 3rd, what it says what we approved was the continuation of Prop 123, the 1.06. You haven't mentioned that, but that was mentioned in April 3rd's vote. So I'm just wondering how that factors in.
The 123 is a dollar amount that they at the bottom, the next to the last line on the bottom, that's a dollar amount that that they add to the to our general budget limit.
So it's already figured in there. 'cause
And
we
that's already
agreed to
figured in
continue
there.
it.
The 1.06%, and that's 1, 2, 3, about the fifth line down, that went away when they increased the base amount. So in theory, they took what that would have been in a base amount increase and factored that in to increasing the base amount.
Okay, so, but just on April 3rd, that 1.06 was added in to show what the increase would be. And I just want to make sure that
that's
that's
correct.
not what's happening here with that 10%. I want to just
That is
clarify.
correct, because at the time, you had both the Joint Legislative Budget Committee and the governor, both of them proposing to continue the 1.06 and to do an additional 1.06. And like I say, usually, when you have the JOBC and the governor both on the same sheet of music, it's, you know, it's relatively certain that that's what you're going to come out with. And then we had the Red for Ed movement, which changed the dynamics of what they were doing, and so that's gone. And then they took that dollar amount and they wrote it into the base amount.
So to that point, carry on, how did we pay our teachers on their paychecks for that Prop 123? Wasn't it separate?
The 1.06 was a stipend.
Was a stipend.
Yes.
Right.
So,
The dollar amount on the 1, 2, 3 part that goes into the base loses its identity in the general budget limit.
right, so correct me if I'm wrong. In the 17-18 school year, we paid the Prop 123 as a stipend. In the 18-19 school year, that stipend goes away and it now gets rolled into the base pay of a teacher.
Right, so it continues,
It continues, but not as, I just want to,
not as a separate item.
we need to, okay, so
we
to
need to
that
make
point, Aaron, we need to come up with a frequently asked question or something that explains everything we're doing so that teachers know and staff know what to expect. So one of the things they need to know to expect is they are not going to get that stipend again in December or November, whenever we gave it. It's just now part of their base salary. And if we don't tell them that, they're not going to know that because they're not all going to watch this meeting, right?
And I didn't understand.
Yeah, and so the other question I had, though, is back to, remember Beckham's math of trying to get to 10%. That 2% step is 2%, but it doesn't translate into 2% worth of dollars because, back to Board Member Kravitz's point, we have teachers that are at the top of their ranges, and they're not going to get it, correct?
Right. Address that.
We've gone through and counted numbers of teachers that are at the bottom. So there are only a handful that are stuck at the bottom, with the exception, because the bottom is higher, it's a higher bottom, for your first 3 columns, which is your BA and your BA plus 12 and your BA plus 24, and those columns don't go all the way down like the other columns, and it was designed that way to be an incentive for staff to continue their education.
Right.
And continue to enhance their knowledge base. For those who are at the BA 36 or the MA level, at the master's level, there's only a handful that are stuck at the bottom column there. And to give them the 10%, we can simply pay them a stipend of the dollar amount that will kick them to the 10% level and address those. And for those that are on those first 3 columns, that's the incentive to get the additional education and improve their knowledge base.
So where's the stipend for the people that are what you're calling the bottom, but I would call the top?
It's a half a dozen people.
Uh-huh.
And the dollar amount is going to be in the neighborhood of 12 to 1,500 range.
Okay.
And so we're talking 15, 20,000.
Oh, but where is it, I guess, on?
It's not.
Oh, okay.
It's just not going to move the needle.
Okay.
But why would we,
Board Member Kirby.
okay, so why would we do it as a stipend rather than just add another step? Because my concern about just as a stipend
Somebody will forget.
is that next year, those folks are going to have to lobby again, and they lobby us every year. And it's, I don't know, why wouldn't we just give them a step so that?
Put it in their base.
Put it in their base.
The step to be consistent would be 2%,
Right.
Right.
and we're looking at 10% increase.
But those that are,
I think I understood it
Okay.
differently.
All right.
What I think I understood is those that are the BA 12 and 24, the reason why they're at that level is because there's an incentive. We want teachers to
Well, then,
continue
yeah.
their education. So by giving them a stipend, it is intentionally one time.
Well,
talking
those
about them in the-
those
I'm talking about the
individuals would
masters.
not get a stipend. The ones on the first 3 columns, the BA, the BA 12, and the BA 24 would not get the stipend, and they're not going to get the step because the incentive is for them to increase their education level.
Right.
And so they'll either accept the incentive and increase their education level, or they won't. And if they choose not to, then they're not going to get additional compensation for it.
So there isn't. Okay.
For the ones that are, the others that are between a master's and a doctorate that have gotten down to the bottom, those that are on the bottom, that's that handful that we could give a stipend. If you wanted to give additional steps, you could, but you lock yourself into those additional steps, that additional step forever. And then the next year, just as they come back and say, hey, I need to lobby again for a stipend, they come back and lobby again and say, hey, add another step. And so you continually increase the potential dollar amount that the district's going to have to pay as others move down there. And I understand the step and I understand the value of the step. And if you think about it, a step is not inflationary. A step is payment for increased experience, right? Because inflationary is handled through raising the base. And it's increased experience that is the step and the value. You can get into a debate on the value of that extra year of experience. Big difference between a first-year teacher and a second-year teacher. Pretty good difference between a second-year teacher and a third-year teacher. I've yet to have someone explain to me the value between year 23 and year 24. That value of that, I'm not saying it has no value, but it has diminished pretty significantly. So I don't know if you want to lock the district into paying for those additional steps ongoing. And if you choose to do so, you can do so. But I think that you give the district more flexibility by doing it through a stipend. And if you choose to continue it, you can. And if in a year you don't have the money to do it, then you can decide not to do it.
Board Member Beckham?
But is part of that problem that the state has not given additional funds so that every year there's not even sometimes a cost of living increase? So you're saying if you're at the bottom or the top, whichever way you want to look at it, BA 12, or let's say 36, and you've been in it for, I don't know what that gets you, 15 years? If it's 15 years of experience, you're saying once you're at 15 years, you can't make any more money because we've got this system set up and there's a step? they can't even get a cost of living increase? Or do they automatically get the cost of living increase as long as the state gives it, because that's then
Yes.
built
If
into
the
it?
state
into the
gives the
base,
cost
yes.
of living increase,
But we-
and you choose to increase the salary schedule with that cost of living increase, then they would get that.
Then they would at
Then they would
least
get
get
that.
that.
Yes,
But you're
they would
saying-
get the cost of living. That becomes your decision. The state, because of the Prop 301, the state's committed to funding the inflation rate. That was part of that lawsuit. And the state has committed to funding the inflation rate, which we get. And so when you increase the overall scale, and then everybody gets an increase. And so assuming that the state doesn't go back on their commitment to funding inflation, and assuming that you're going to increase the salary schedule every year that the state gives you inflationary funds, then they would get an increase every year.
The reality is, though, we have.
And the one assumption you control is whether or not, and in what amount to increase the overall schedule.
Part of the problem too is I think that a lot has changed since that schedule has come out. I'm assuming that schedule's 20, 25, 30, could it be 50 years old? I don't know how long we've had the step schedule. But what's transpired that's different is the cost of getting a master's. It no longer makes sense, if you're looking at pure economics, to go spend $50,000 for a master's degree to get a $3,000 movement each year, right? So we might have to re-examine that step, because that incentive you talked about may not make that much sense anymore
I mean, if
either.
you want to go there, and this is not to be done this fiscal year, we might need to reexamine the whole schedule and consider a stepless schedule, which many districts have done.
Many districts have done, yes.
But that's a year-long project, at
Yeah.
least.
Yes.
And that's a huge undertaking, even for a very experienced HR department.
Right.
And right now, don't really have an HR department. We have an HR department of one, maybe. But it's a
Yeah.
good question for a different time, though.
Right, but it has to be
yeah, and-
understood if that's but that goes back to understanding that that is possibly a challenge that we have, and maybe that's why it makes sense this year to do a stipend, but with the understanding that it's
yeah.
going to be a stipend continuing.
I agree. because
Until
I
they
think-
take
some way
I
of
think there's so
codifying
much,
stipends.
that
I think there's
step
been a lot of
system.
things that have, in the past, that's made us question, do we really have to review that step schedule? And I know we got feedback recently about just the idea of adding a step, adding a step, adding a step. There's just the perception of it, that it's automatic every year, whether you have the budget or not, that's a problem. And then it just creates this unwieldy, schedule that just keeps growing, growing, growing. I know personally, in the professional field, with nurses and things, a longevity stipend is very common. And you just receive that because you haven't necessarily gone back to school and moving up. You're just there and you receive a longevity stipend. It's standard practice, and I think it works in that area. I wouldn't see why it wouldn't work here. And so I think especially with knowing where we probably want to go, that makes the most sense to deal with those staff members who they've hit that ceiling and can't go. It just makes all the sense in the world.
So, to recap, if I was a teacher, how would you explain to me what's going to happen with the salaries next year?
That we're increasing the base by 8%, and we're giving a step, which is the equivalent of 2%. And so teachers will get a 10% increase. For those who are on, I think it's starting with column D, that those individuals who are on the last step of column D through whatever it goes to, G or H, whatever it goes to, that those individuals will be given a stipend, which will make their increase the equivalent of make their increase 10%.
So I should see then the salary schedule, the schedule itself. I'm not a teacher anymore, I'm back to being a board member. I should see it increase by 8%.
On the salary schedule.
Every number on that schedule will increase by 8%. Is that
Correct.
correct?
Yes.
That's, I want to applaud the work that's been done with the team, from the team against the 10% salary increase. I mean, I think it's the right pool of teachers. It captures the greater number of teachers. We delivered the 10%. It's relatively simple to articulate, and it's hitting everybody. We're not doing a subset here and a subset here. I think it's great work. So thank you.
I do have one little wrench, and it's feedback that our board's gotten, is the idea that we did correct our starting salary, I think, last year to be competitive. And those teachers, especially in that 5 to 10 year range that just received nothing, they're a lot closer to those starting salary teachers than obviously one would like to see. And I guess what I'm not seeing is any sort of adjustment for that. If we truly take that starting salary year one teacher up to the 8% as well, there's still that little gap. Is that just something we kind of have to accept because we know those years were those years?
For
or is
this,
there a way to kind of correct it?
For this year, yes, you're going to have to accept it because we already moved the beginning step to step 7 from step 5, and you already got some contracts of people that are coming in.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, I wasn't talking about anybody going down. I'm
In
just not sure
hindsight,
if,
had we not done that already, just the 8% increase to the salary schedule would have brought those teachers in at a higher amount so that you could have left 5 as the starting. But because we did that earlier and we've already committed to it.
right. Yeah, I wouldn't ever talk about taking away.
No, we
I'm
just-
just wondering if that first step, that first year teacher, does that step, I guess there's no way, I don't want to make it
Not include the
complicated.
8%
To not
base.
include in their 8% raise, because
Base.
we already built up that step, but that may just complicate
complicates
things
it.
too much.
Well, especially
Yeah.
for those that you've already got on contract, and then you increase the whole salary schedule and to try and cut them out of the herd, that's not going to go
Yeah.
very well.
I mean, we love our first-year teachers
Right,
and year
yes,
twos.
yeah.
But yeah, those years 5 through 10 teachers, I mean, we know it's the recession, we know it was reality, but yeah,
Right.
they, it's kind of.
But we
not-
gave,
But they're getting 10%, so we're going in the right
Going in the
direction.
right direction.
I agree.
Well, then that's even a better incentive for teachers to come into the profession and come to Scottsdale.
And there was absolutely all the logic in the world to get our starting salary up higher and competitive. We'd never want to take that down, by no means, but
so Dr. Virgil,
Member Kirby.
since fiscal year 16, with what we've discussed here today, how much will teachers' salaries increase next year? Since fiscal year 16, what percentage?
Off the top of my head, I do not know. I'd have to go back and look at that previous presentation and grab the numbers from that
I think it's going to
presentation
be
that
over.
we did, I
Well,
think, back in March.
It's right here.
And-
I think it's going to be over 21%, about 21%. Over
But we were around 14.
And that had 3.5% for fiscal year 19.
Okay, so that has 3.5. It should have only had 2.5, and then add the additional 7. So yeah, it's around 19 approximately. I mean, I'd have to get that slide back out and redo it, but somewhere around 19 to
Well-
20 in that range.
I think that's, and the reason why I'm bringing that up is also on that webinar, they made a point of reminding us all that there was legislation passed that we need to include on our website, I think by October-ish, what we've done with teacher salaries.
Yeah.
And the increase that we're giving Scottsdale teachers. There's minimum requirements of what we need to put on that website, but there's no maximum. And I would also suggest that we put some historical perspective as well that shows what we've given teachers for the past 3 years leading up to the 18-19 school year. And then total it up, 19, 20%, whatever that is.
I would, I agree with you, that needs to be done and has to be done as far as doing that. But also, you know, to put things in perspective, because you hear different districts doing different percentage amounts. But what you don't hear from those districts is what they've done with their class size. And your class size has a direct impact on what you're able to pay. And so you may, because you can add other things, you may want to add your class size. Because somebody may give out a higher percentage, but if they're running 3 more per class than you are, they're really not, you know, it's not apples to apples if they're running larger class sizes. So, and that's a piece that the class size shows up in the Auditor General's classroom in the dollar account, but it doesn't link to the raises that are going out. And I think to truly get a true picture of where districts are at, you'd want to link those two together of the raises, because you could give great raises if you jacked up your class size, but that's not what you want to do. So I think you need to include the class size in that posting so that people can see the relativity between pay increases and class size.
Bless you. Thanks.
Can you, before we move on, address Prop 301 dollars, which is completely separate from everything we've been discussing, correct?
Yes.
And what they said on the webinar is that they're projecting that those dollars will go up as well.
Well,
by about a point.
the Prop 301, that factors in significantly to being able to do the 10%. Because right now, when you look at that salary schedule and you look at a teacher's salary amount, 91.35% of that dollar amount is M&O. 2.67% is Fund 011, which is teacher compensation, and 5.37 is Fund 013, which is part of the Prop 301 that can be used. That was called the bucket list, but teacher compensation is one of those items, and Scottsdale has that money into teacher salary. So 5.37% of that was that Fund 013. And then 0.61% of that salary amount is the Instructional Improvement Fund, what's referred to as the Indian Gaming, with the state's agreement with the tribes on their gaming. So to get the true 10%, those percentages have to go up proportionately so that the dollar amounts, the percentages can remain the same, but the dollar amount that go in them, obviously it's percentage of a bigger number, so you got to have more dollars to come to backfill it. For Prop 301, our Prop 301 dollar amount is going up. It's just less than 1%. It's like 0.95 or something. They're calling it 1%. It's almost 1%. So that's going up. We got $386 per student. Now we'll get $423 per student, so it's a $37 per student increase, and it'll increase about $1 million. So Prop 301 has the money available to match the dollars necessary to maintain their percentage to move that salary schedule up. Prop 301 is fine. 020, the Instructional Improvement Fund, when that was passed originally, there was a limit. You know, most things, they would say you had to spend so much on salaries, and they did the opposite when they brought the law into effect that had the 020 money, the Instructional Improvement Fund. They said you can't spend more than 50% on salaries. And so we're there. We're at that limit. So we don't want to increase, even though there's dollars in that fund, because obviously the other half can be used for other things, but you can't use it for salaries. So what we'll do, because Prop 301 has additional funds, the additional funding of Prop 301 is enough to cover what would have been 020's portion of that increase. So the percentage for 020 will actually drop a little bit. The dollar amount will stay the same, but the percentage, because it's a bigger number, the percentage will drop a little bit. And then the percentages for the 011 and 013 will go up slightly to make up that difference. So M&O will still be the 91.35%, but there'll be enough money there to raise everything to the 10%. I know that's probably more detail than you ever wanted to know about how the salary schedule
That I
is
didn't totally
built.
follow, but.
But what it did tell you is.
But we'll make it work, and the money's there in Prop 301 to make it work.
Board Member Kravitz?
Could you just repeat what percentage of Prop 301 money is going into to make up that 10%? Or that goes into our teacher's salary?
On the salary schedule,
base?
when you look at a number on the salary schedule,
Right.
91.35% of that salary amount comes from M&O.
Right.
2.67% of that comes from Fund 011, which is part of the Prop 301. 5.37% of that comes from Fund 013, which is part of Prop 301.
Okay.
And 0.61 comes from Fund 020, which is your Instructional Improvement Fund.
The reason I ask, wasn't there an issue a while back where too much of Prop 301 money was used for our teacher-based salary a couple of years back?
Well, I know the concern was if it's
And
sunsetting,
if it went away, we
we're
were in big
trouble.
trouble. I mean, so
And
now
I
it's,
think-
is
I
it,
believe that has changed.
Yeah.
so
I
we
think
don't
it's
have to
extended.
worry now
Yes.
since
Right.
it's
It's
not
not going to sunset right
Okay.
now.
I
Fix
just
that.
wanted
It's not going
to
to
know.
sunset anytime soon. They changed the
Yes.
law on that,
Okay.
yes.
Okay. I think that concern is gone. And, well, all right, Board Member Kirby.
Would it be possible to send communication out to staff? Doesn't have to be very long, actually, the shorter the better, that very simply, in layman's terms, explains what the board has discussed here today with respect to teacher salary before we vote, so that we communicate on, what is today, May 22nd, the board had a work study and discussed the following for teacher pay raises next year. And then you do your 8% of the base plus a 2% step, and then the stipend for those, and that's it. And the board will be voting on this item whenever we vote, whenever that date is. To improve our communication. I mean, we know we
We could vote on it today, but.
oh, we could? Is it on as an action
It's
item
not-
today?
This is an action item, but it doesn't have to be. I don't, you can obviously table it.
first.
Is there any
We have,
urgency
our
to vote
next
today?
meeting isn't until the June 7th, so I'm not sure if we want to leave it all in limbo, but.
7th.
There's always, we can always schedule another meeting.
But why can't we just vote on the 7th?
Well, we've got some timelines to hit.
Okay.
Okay.
We need to have the proposed budget in front of you to say, yes, this is the proposed budget, so that we can publish it on the 10 days prior to adoption. So if you want to publish it, if you want to adopt it on the 26th, then you're going to have that published 10 days prior. We were going to do that at the June 12th meeting to have you officially propose it so that we can publish it then, and that you can then adopt it on the 26th.
So,
That agenda item for the 12th is due to you on the 1st. So we got, I mean, we can adjust some timelines.
So- so you're talking about the entire budget. This is obviously a major portion of that. So if they chose to vote today on this compensation package, that would help them.
To meet those timelines. Now, we can adopt a budget independent of a salary decision.
Yeah, but I wouldn't recommend that.
Yeah.
That's,
Yeah.
it can be
Sure.
done. I don't know if you want to do it, but
Well, can I add to this?
I think what Board Member Kirby is suggesting, or the reason behind it is, there's regularly questions that we get from teachers afterwards. It just doesn't translate, no matter what we try to do.
No.
We think we get a percentage there, and it doesn't translate somehow in the paycheck. So I think what you're suggesting is let's just simply get it in writing, because our understanding right now is every teacher gets 10%.
Right. And it is more transparent if we put something out before you vote
Exactly,
than a fait accompli.
yeah.
Every
And in the
teacher-
spirit of
An
being
opportunity
inclusive
for
in the
feedback.
process, that would maybe support that, also that intent that we really do have.
That's every teacher with the exception of those that are on the last step of those first three columns.
Which is how many?
That's around 90,
Ninety?
And they would get
19.
8%.
and they would get 8%. That's approximately 90, I believe, was the count
90 or
on that.
19?
90, yes.
90.
That's a lot.
I thought you said it was a half a.
Half
No,
a dozen.
That's
the-
those
Those are the
on the
max.
that would get the longevity stipend.
Oh.
Beyond
So we're
those
talking
steps, the veteran teachers who are at the bottom and have no step to
Oh,
go.
that's true.
We're talking about 90 teachers who are new teachers who haven't gotten their full,
No,
Masters.
they're on one of the first three steps, not steps,
what you need to
column.
clarify.
They're on one of those first three columns, the BA, the BA 12, and the BA 24, and those steps, they don't go down to the 20-something. They only go down, I think, to like 10, 11, and 12, and so they
So
don't
they would
drop.
get 10, 11, 12.
Like from the masters and above drops down to 20-something on the step, and those first three columns don't do that, and it was designed that way to be the incentive for additional education. So all the teachers except those three columns that are on the bottom step of those three columns.
And again, that is around, give or take, a year.
Approximately 90 individuals.
But about 10 years of being on the schedule.
Well, it's,
Or on the 10th step.
I believe it's step 10, 11, and 12. Depending on how often you have given a step, it's, I think it's more than
But it's
10
not
years because I
generally
don't think
speaking in
that
your
you've given
first
steps,
5.
but it,
So what do you have to do if you're a teacher to go to
Take
move
classes.
along? Take classes?
take classes.
Outside of what Scottsdale Schools offers, or can you leverage
Is there
our
professional
in-house
development?
PD?
There's a formula where you can use those hours, if they're appropriate hours, to move on the salary schedule. There's a specific formula that so many hours equate to a movement.
Credit, to a college credit.
Yeah.
But so does it just, you get credits and that's how you move across, or do you have to earn an entire degree?
No.
You just get credits and move across?
We can do both.
Yeah.
In increments.
So 90 teachers, I just did the math, is 6.8% of our teachers. 90 divided by 1321, which you said were the FTEs of all certified. So 90 is 6.8% of all certified that will get 8% and not 10%, correct?
Correct.
That just needs to be part of the communication.
And there's an example why we need it written out before we vote, because I don't think any of us understood that it was 90 teachers. I think we need to have it written down for us to know exactly what we're voting on.
We can work on it.
I'd like to, speaking of clarity, talk about the classified staff and what is in the proposal here, because I see the 1% increase, which I think I wasn't sure if that was just to give that dollar amount, or what is the actual proposal?
The
2%.
proposal was 2%. I put each
Okay.
of the groups at 1% because it just makes it easy
Just
when
to
you want to talk
understand.
about how
Okay.
much is 2 or
Okay.
3 or 2.5 to
So-
use one as the base.
So
The
for the
proposal was
classified
for-
staff, the proposal is 2%.
For classified,
The
yes.
classified salary study implementation, is that inclusive of that?
That is separate from that.
Or additional?
That is in addition to that.
Okay, so that's classified salary study implementation, that means there's going to be staff members, classified staff members, that are going to see more than 2%.
Correct.
Is that, and it's mostly focusing in on what's competitive salary and that type of?
Yes.
Type of thing?
Right.
Okay. Okay. So that's clear too. Board Member Becca.
So going to that point, can you go back to that list? There were some options. A couple of things that were talked about. One was increased security. So it looks like adding 4 security officers.
Yes.
So that would be for the 4 high schools that don't have them now because we hired one new already? Or where
As
where
far
are?
as what their individual assignments, I'd have to refer to our security chief on that.
Well, I am interested to know, is that enough? We had unfortunately, another tragic shooting, and it's, security is something I think that we need to look at, and maybe even in a little bit broader sense, maybe having Dr. Sakos also maybe providing some, I know there's been some research about how, and I know we've done it, it's at least one of our high schools, we have some social, I don't know if it's just one social worker, but looking at adding some additional staffing, and whether it's social workers or psychologists or what it is, to understand this disengaged youth that seems to be the individuals that are turning to violence. I don't know if there's enough research to know if it's, it's measurable, that it makes a difference, but I don't want to discount it going into another budget cycle. And then we also talked about additional counselors at some point, and I don't see additional counselors up there, so I didn't know where those 2 items fit, or any of the other areas that maybe need to look at for improving academics at our school.
Dr. Creekard wanted to address that.
I agree absolutely that security has to be a priority, that we will do everything that we can to prevent what has happened in other places to happen to our kids, absolutely. You'll see on a future board agenda a request for expenditures for a more comprehensive security camera program at the schools, updated and more extensive. There was a request for psychologists, non-special ed, that we're still considering. It's not, you didn't put it in this.
It was not part of the recommendation, but it was part of the considerations, and
Right,
it's
right.
the
So
last
you'll
item on,
continue to-
it's the last line on the current slide.
Right, we'll continue to work with Mrs. Sakos to talk about that, and social workers and counselors, that whole realm of crisis prevention and mental health assistance in the schools. So that is a concern. In fact, I'm meeting with 3 people after this meeting about a concern that I have for security and beefing up some of our systems so that when an occurrence is announced at another school in another state or wherever, that we take the proper precautions to not put our own kids into fright and panic. So we have a lot of things going on, and you'll see some of those coming back.
And I really appreciate that. I think our community will be very pleased to see that there's that discussion. I think that the one item is that they will go back to what happened last year, which was told security, well, we don't have the funds. So does it make sense to look at, if we've got 1.6 million in that carry forward still left over, to allocate in this budget some funds so that this year, when you come up with those recommendations, the answer is not, oh, we don't have the funds, we have to wait to next year, that we actually would have the funds available so we could implement them sooner than a whole year away. I don't know if that's feasible,
Yes.
or if it would be something that the board would be interested in.
Board Member Kirby?
Well, you bring up a good question. Dr. Virgil, do you recommending allocating the full 5 million of our unallocated budget? Or do you recommend holding a little bit back?
I would, I would keep something back.
For reasons like what? What could,
We get in a war with Iran and oil goes up to $200 a barrel.
gas is
Just,
going
you know,
up.
just a
Let's just put it on
hypothetical,
gas.
just I'm not,
Yeah.
you know, I'm
So
not predicting the future,
Yeah.
but.
It's almost like a rainy day
Right,
fund, right?
right.
A little bit.
A
Now,
cooler at a school goes down, chiller goes down at a school, has to be replaced in August.
I just want to, I don't want anyone watching or who might watch to think we just have $1.6 million that we can go spend. We could, it probably isn't prudent to do so.
And I wasn't making the assumption that the 1.6 would go
No,
towards
understood.
security, but maybe a portion, or at least have that intent of that additional rainy day fund. Could it be used if a recommendation comes up that, from security?
Board Member Hartman.
And I'm not suggesting we do this, but for clarity, there was the carry forward of the 5 million, of which we earmarked 3.6 million. But there's also the 41 million in reserve that you mentioned.
The other funds, that's correct, and this does not touch that, so it just continues to grow. So, as Ms. Kirby had mentioned earlier, if something really, really bad happens, you can always move to use some of that. If something is greater than the 1.6 million, you could always use some of that as well.
And
Is that completely available? Some of it, I don't think we've ever seen that. I think it was an exercise that was to be done, right? Because there's, of that reserve, some of it really is not potentially allocable. Some of it really is committed to or restricted, and some is less so, correct?
All of it has a specific statute that controls or dictates what it can be spent on and where the revenues come from. A district this size has activities of such that you could find an expense for all of it, essentially.
So we have quite a
Well-
large rainy day fund.
But that rainy day fund can only be used for specific things, right? So it's not really.
But if we had,
but we have yet another bucket, correct, and that's the district additional assistance.
That's right, we haven't
We haven't
got
even
to
gotten
that
to that.
yet.
Haven't gotten
That's
that
right.
yet.
That is,
That's right.
so that's yet another bucket.
We've still got
So
that coming, right?
We may need to look at all of these rainy day funds or buckets of money that we could spend in M&O if we had to. All of them, we could. And just put some thought and clarity around, we're gonna go, I'm just making this up, we're gonna go to the other funds to offset any unanticipated enrollment declines. We're gonna keep $1.6 million for bad things that happen, chillers and fuel increases and things like that. The other question, I had another point that I was gonna make. I forgot what it was. It'll come to me in a second.
Do you want to get to our capital?
If you're
Yvonne,
ready
we
to
can
go
come
there.
back.
Oh,
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Oh, I know what it was. I'm sorry. There's nothing on here about programmatic investments. So like the accelerated middle school, the middle school IB program, do we not have any investments required programmatically?
I can tell you on the accelerated middle school that this coming year would be a very minimal investment because we're talking about just the planning process. That would qualify for DSEG dollars, which while they're still M&O, is in a different category than what we're talking about right here. And so that would be a year from now,
Okay,
having
so-
that discussion. What other?
Middle school IB, just any programmatic, the traditional school, PIMA traditional, any programmatic.
All of that has been budgeted for already for this coming year out of various sources. So it's nothing that's not been accounted for.
Everything's
already.
been accounted for?
Yes, it has.
Okay, all right, good.
Okay, so we're ready to look at DAA?
We are.
All right, so this slide stayed the same. That's what we got for this year. So our reduced DAA was only the 1.3 million. And going into next year, this slide has a change to it. On the last one that I showed you, I had a range of what the reduction was going to be based on a couple of different approaches to it. This reduction is based on the Auditor General's number, and I have much more confidence in the number that the Auditor General's office gave out as far as what they computed their estimated reduction would be, and so this one I feel relatively confident that that's pretty close to what it will actually come out. We won't know until in the fall what the actual reduction is because of the way the state does it, but this reduction estimates I believe to be pretty close, so that your DAA will be 3.8 million, which is up 2.5 million from last year. So last year we didn't have a lot budgeted because it was such a small number. We didn't have a lot budgeted. We had the 750 in building services that was budgeted, and other than that, the remainder of the capital was held for things that come up during the year, because it wasn't enough to spread it out, and so we didn't. Continued the 750 for building services. Copier needs out of IT was 380,000 for copiers. And then, as last time, I brought up the issue of an aging vehicle fleet as to whether or not you wanted to spend some of the capital money on starting to modernize your fleet and get to a newer fleet so that your maintenance costs and fuel costs drop and your breakdowns decrease and so on and so forth. But that's that would be a capital expense to do so. So I did not include any of this to put into the M&O. And the reason I didn't do that is, one, we could do the proposal, the recommendation, without the need of any DAA. Obviously, if there's additional things you want to do, you could do that. I don't recommend it. Once you budget this district additional assistance into M&O, where it goes into salaries and positions, because that's 80–85% of your M&O budget. Once you put this in, it is very, very hard to get it back out. And so right now you're in year one of a 5-year capital override, and have a supportive community that supported and voted that in. In 5 years, that is going to, in 4 years, that's going to expire, and you're going to have to go back out. If the state continues to eliminate the DAA reduction, and the rationale for your capital override was that the state had cut all your capital money, and you had to do something to take care of your capital needs. If you put all your DAA into M&O, and your capital override runs out, which it will, that's a different scenario now to go back to the voters and ask for another capital override when you've taken your capital, because now you're getting capital money. It's not an issue if you're not getting it, but you've chosen to spend it on M&O. So it's a different approach to your voters of, hey, we needed some more M&O money, so we spent our capital, so vote yes and give us more capital. That's a different ask than the ask you made on this one, and whether or not you want to do that. That obviously your choice on which way you want to go on that. I can't stand before you and recommend that you take DAA and put it into M&O, because I just know how difficult it is to pull it out when you need capital. Because once it gets into positions and pay, it's hard. You can do it, but it's painful.
Board Member Hartman.
And can you help me reconcile to the earlier conversation when we talked about building something into the base? So if you were to take it from DAA, it does not get built into the base, so carrying it forward, how does the system recognize?
Well, the DAA is formula driven. So it's going to, you know, every year you're going to get a district additional assistance. But if you budget that to spend it in M&O, which on the budget sheet is just a matter of simply writing in that you're going to spend X number of dollars of the district additional assistance in M&O, and then it goes into your general budget limit. So it's real easy to add it in there. The hard part is that when you need capital money and you don't have any, and you look and say, okay, where's my DAA, and you see it all in M&O, you've got to pull it out of M&O. So it's like it's like having a reduction of your M&O to get it back into capital.
Let me ask it a little bit different, because I understand the precedence and then the conundrum you kind of get in. But for example, say just theoretically wanted to pull classified 1%, which is 248,000 out of DAA and put it over there. Does that get built into the base for classified though, so that when the formula recalcs next year, that 1% is now built in the base? Granted, we've lost it one time.
Yes, when you increase the classified salary schedule by 1% or 2%, you increase the schedule, that the entire schedule goes up. So now to get that money out, you would have to reduce that schedule and reduce everybody's wages to pull that money back out.
Well, but what I'm saying, do you have to reduce it? Because if you build it into the base, does it get built into the,
Which
the
M&O base?
That's the state base,
That's what I'm
just
guessing.
our salary base.
Yeah.
So that's why many districts now and then, when they want to avoid something into the base, whether it be certified or classified, they might give a yearly stipend. That's why that 1.06 was given as a stipend a year ago, because people didn't want it into the base and be committed to it long term.
Right. How does it, the prior conversation, the full 10% is built into the base that we've just talked about. But that all came from?
They came from our budget,
Right.
the governor and
Right.
legislature part, and our rainy day fund.
Right, which gets built into the base. So why would, just say in theory, if we did pull 248 over into classified, why would that not be in the base, get built into it?
Because those other funds came from state money into the M&O.
And this wouldn't?
Right. This is capital.
I get it, but I'm just saying, once it gets applied over there, does it?
Because the state does not fund us based on our salary schedule base. It funds us on our per pupil weighted ADM.
But the DAA would be good for things like chillers that go down.
Yes.
One time.
Yeah, one-time,
Occurrences.
operational type expenses.
That's
A lot of capital.
Capital. And,
Anything programmatic?
and oh, by the way, we have millions of dollars built into the bond for our bus fleet,
Yeah.
to go buy new buses. I think 6 million.
We have 6 million.
We
Yes.
spent 1.6 last year.
Yeah, so I don't, I'm not tracking why you're bringing up the bus fleet
Okay,
here.
well,
Because the bond doesn't cover it fully.
your average fleet age, and this is just your pupil transportation of your buses. Right now, your average is 11.35 years, which is a little old. Optimal in a perfect world, and money wasn't an option, an object, you'd probably want to shoot for about 7, and that's kind of that happy median between buses that aren't breaking down but aren't brand new. So an average age gives you, then you're somewhere between a new bus and a 14-year-old bus. So if you wanted to move that 11.35 to a lesser number, to a 10 or a 9 or 8, whatever, if you took the $6 million and spent it all at one time and bought new buses, you would move that 11.35 to about 7.7. But next year, because now your 6 million's gone, so
I
next
see what you're
year
saying, yeah.
you're 8.7, right, 9.7, and in 4 or 5 years you're right back to where you were.
Right.
You didn't get anywhere. You still have. So if you do it incrementally, you're just going to maintain, because it takes about 11 to 13 vehicles based on the size of the fleet to maintain an age. to keep it from aging more, you have to buy 11 to 13 every year.
Okay, I got it.
And that's all that 6 million is going to do, is maintain the age. It's not going to
reduce
going
it.
to make it younger, right?
Gotcha.
Board Member Beckman?
So did you identify copiers, vehicle fleet, and whatever is in building services as the 3 priorities to use these capital funds for? Or how did you determine that those were what you put on the slide?
Well,
What were the priorities?
those were 3 priorities that I identified. I'm not saying that those are the only priorities, and there may be other priorities out there. We didn't budget capital last year because it was such a small amount that we didn't try and break it up into a little bit for everybody, because it would have been an insignificant amount. And so we held it, and then based on needs, people could put in a request, and it was taken to cabinet and the superintendent, and a decision made, you know, to do that. For things that had to be done, they were done, and for things that were optional, but somebody had a perceived need, if cabinet and the superintendent agreed that that was a need, then it was, then the monies were allocated for it.
Okay, so you don't have a dollar amount under the vehicle bus. So what dollar amount are you recommending to be able to improve the age of our vehicles, since the bond doesn't cover it fully, to be able to do it on an annual basis? What would that look like?
Well, this is just the pupil transportation. You've also got the support vehicle fleet, which is actually in worse shape than the pupil transportation fleet. So I was thinking in the range of $1 million to 1.5 million in vehicles. And I mean, when you think of a bus, bus is about 120,000. So that's not lots of buses. That's, you know, just a few buses to start moving that. I mean, it would take years, you know, to lower that age significantly. It would take years, but you just start chipping away at it. And if you get into a year where you think, hey, you know, I've got some other capital needs, then fine, you don't do the vehicles that year, and you live with what you've got. But I think it would be prudent to try to start to lower that average age.
And so that's the same as with copiers, the bonds for the new schools, but there's copiers in the existing schools, and about 380,000 is what's been recommended.
Right, that
improve
number,
the fleet of
I
copiers.
talked with the IT director who's oversees the copier issue in the district, and that was the number that she believed that she needs to move forward with the copier plan.
And can I ask a board question? Do we approve this capital budget just like we do the salary budget? So are you looking for an approval on these numbers, or what are you?
It'll all come as one package of budget.
Just in one package, so this is kind of informational today. So I think that what I would like to see then is kind of a plan, especially for the vehicle and fleets, you know, a number in there, and maybe, you know, show that if we did that every year, what that would look like and what it would do.
You're open.
Board Member Kirby?
It's going to be a can of worms, though. We've tried this multiple times, and the big question that comes up is, why do we need to buy the size of buses we continue to buy? When
Well, then
you
that should
look
be
at
the
them
recommendation.
and they're empty. They drive around the district. I get the high schools. You need some buses for the band and the football team, but when you see an elementary, I don't know, they're 80 seaters, 82 seaters for an elementary school,
That's
day
part of the
after
plan.
day, and it's got 3 kids on it.
We've already had this conversation, we're reducing the size of the buses.
transportation person come in and give us?
I think, yeah, then that's up for the transportation director, who I think did do some of the plan to work with you on
We did.
what that does look like and how much it actually would be. It doesn't mean we're going to be approving it every year, like you said. These things come up, but if we have available funds and it is viewed as something that actually ends up usually, as I remember, saves some money because you have less maintenance, you have better fuel costs and things like that, but we can't approve it without having something substantial behind it other than average age is 11 years.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, we have a plan that was made when the bond passed for the 6 million of how many vehicles and what type to buy each year. And so what we would do is we would accelerate that that schedule, but we can, we can put together a new plan with that built in if that's what you want to see.
Well, I think it would take into what Board Member Kirby said also, looking at, it's not just replacing what we have. It's downsizing or getting the best vehicle for what our needs are.
We have to buy buses for the largest route. Because most buses are used for elementary, middle school, and high school. So which routes require the most space? Which means maybe the elementary, you only have a handful of kids at this route. And then, but by high school, or probably more likely middle school, then they're full. So you have to do it. Now, routing is the issue really to get at how that happens, how you fill it up. And then you're dealing with too much time on the bus for little kids, or what is the walking distance that is safe. So it's that issue, but in terms of buses appear to be empty at some times of the day, that's true because they're full at another time of the day, used for tiered routes. So.
Right. And we have, we currently have,
look at it
and I don't know the exact number, but we have a number of different types of buses, different sizes, because your big ones are your 84 passenger, and then you've got the smaller ones to where you need a smaller bus that's serving, say, an apartment complex, and they don't have the room to turn around with the great big 84 pack in an apartment parking lot. And then you've got the special needs buses that have the wheelchair ramps, and so there's there's a number of different types for different things. But as Dr. Creekard said, you usually focus on what your maximum number is going to be.
Kirby?
Okay, I'd like to go back, if we can, to the expenditure options and the security personnel. It appears, if I took notes correctly, we're not increasing the number of personnel, nor are we giving a salary increase to our security guards.
For security personnel?
Did I catch that right?
The recommendation was to add 4.
Oh, okay, we are getting 4. So, all right, so then here's my question.
But not to do the salary increase, since they'll get the 2% classified increase.
Okay.
So it's not that.
So they're getting the 2% classified. Okay, that answered my question. Thank you.
Board Member Kravitz.
Not to open another can of worms, but if we're going to look at buying buses, we also have to look at bell schedules, because I remember several years ago it was, having high schools and middle schools start at the same time is better because we'll need, I think it was fewer buses, and it turns out.
It's going to save $500,000, remember?
Yeah, it was going to save us money, and I don't believe that is necessarily the case. So when we talk about buses, we need to talk about bell schedules, because I think having 3 routes might be the way to go, because then we're also using more personnel. There are 3 different bell schedules, I should say, not 3 routes, 3 different bell schedules. We're using the personnel that we have in a better way. I just want to put that out there. Thank you.
There's a can of worms that's been staring at us for a little while, yes. Recommendations, I mean, I obviously can't change this coming year, 18, 19, but it does seem appropriate that we start talking about that early.
Yes.
In our 18, 19 school year for the following school year. Board Member Hartman?
So it seems like we're nearing wrapping up, so I just wanted to clarify when we were going to see the response to the school psychologist, social worker / mental health kind of recommendation, as well as the college and career counselor, because those were the other 2 classified buckets that I think we need to take into consideration when we look at these other items.
The next time we look at the budget, before you approve the budget.
Okay, so we'll see that added in, and there has to be a give and a get, right? Because to add that in, there's something that probably goes away, so we need to, or we find dollars somewhere, so we'll need to understand how Okay, how we can justify it. All right, thank you.
And the clarification on the 1.3 million savings.
Right.
And where, okay, sorry.
Member
Another
Kravitz?
question, where do stipends fall into, that we pay our teachers for coaching or whatever, where does that fall?
There's a separate salary schedule that's been budgeted for supplemental contracts.
Okay, because that's something we need to look at too. That probably needs a whole review or something.
that's-
But legal coming up
It's
with the
another can of
supplemental
worms.
contract.
That's another can of worms.
That's another can of worms, but, you know, we need to look at it.
So, did you have more in the presentation?
No, the
Okay.
DAA was the end of it.
Okay, so we're looking at budget timelines. What I'm hearing is not an action taken today, more information coming. I respect and understand the idea of let's get the information out and have our staff digest and get feedback before an actual action item. But the flip side of that coin to me is the uncertainty of will that raise actually happen? And the longer we keep that in the air of, well, they say they're gonna do this, but we're not sure what's gonna really happen when it all, I hate to keep our staff going into the summer with that concern. So I would say if we're going to have another meeting to truly just focus on an action regarding the staff salary increase, I would say we don't wait until June 12th and that we have it I mean, a lot of our staff is going to be here through June 1st, have it before that date or by that date.
We could add it to the study session on the 7th as an action item.
Is the 7th too late? I said, we still have a lot of staff here through June 1st.
What do you think, as educators, do you think, how would they feel?
I just, yeah.
If we have next week, we could.
I
if
just
that's
hate
your
leaving
desire,
that
we could add another
uncertainty
special
out
meeting.
for 2 weeks, basically, is what we're looking, over 2 weeks. Before June 7th.
From an educator standpoint, where do you see the balance on that? Time to reflect, weigh in, or certainty of 10%? Where's that?
Well, based on emails that I've been receiving, and my response being, please, when you get a chance, look at this session, because I think it will answer a lot of your questions of the intent of the district. And given the fact that there is some uncertainty as to what we will do, that probably if we could do something next week, that would give them a week, so to speak, to.
Could we get the communication out today? Because sometimes when we ask for communication to be sent out, it's a couple days later.
I think so.
Get approval on a copy, I'm drafting it right now.
Okay, so we could get it today. And then, is it too much to ask to add classified communication?
I'll send it to my staff and we'll do it.
Okay.
And talk about the proposed raises that were
And when the,
favorably seen by the board, language something.
and a
like
vote is
that,
anticipated
vote
on
anticipated
June
on
or May,
on
whatever.
June.
It's in there already. Okay.
Since we're all sitting here with our calendars, and there's trouble.
7th is Thursday.
7th is a Thursday, but that's, I said, over 2 weeks away.
That's next week.
May 31st, that's 2 weeks away.
2 weeks.
May 31st is the Thursday kind of in between.
Okay.
Well, I'm not here, and I can't call in.
Okay. Is there a day earlier? The 30th?
29th.
29th,
I could,
Tuesday, next Tuesday.
next
That's 1
Tuesday?
week.
1 week.
That's 1 week.
Okay.
Is that a
I'm
possibility
available.
for everyone?
Any particular time? I could do it very early in the morning.
Define very.
Yeah.
Six,
If
you're
you could
early
get
is
it done
4
before
p.m.
10, so
Oh.
8 to 10.
8 to
8 to
10?
10?
I can do that.
All right. that staff does that work for staff? So Tuesday, May 29th, we will have a meeting
At 8 a.m.
at 8 a.m. to discuss this action item regarding staff salary increases.
Okay.
We'll limit it to that. Okay. All right. That do it for this one item?
To get these.
Okay. Thank you. It is great news. Great news.
Thank you for all your
Thank
work.
you.
Yes,
Thank you,
very
everyone.
much. Thank you.
It's good work.
All right, so we'll move on to our next action item, 3B, approval of revised academic calendar. Dr. Precard, is that your presentation?
Actually, it is Dr. Nance who will speak to the revised academic calendar to reflect the corrected number of instructional days and instructional hours for the current school year.
And I'm actually looking at both of those next two agenda items as almost one piece. We're required to report to the state any change in our academic calendar. And from the days that were missed, that students missed school, all of the minutes were examined at all of our schools. And with a couple of schools making some slight additions of time over the last couple of weeks, we can verify that every school has met the required number of hours of instruction for the school year, and we're under a fairly tight time frame to get this information to the state. I believe we need to get it there today, tomorrow at the latest, so that we don't risk any financial.
Yeah, we don't miss
Dr.
a
Precard.
payment to the district, and which was
I think the June payment.
June payment to the district.
Board Member Kirby?
So I have a question on Hohokam and Tavon. And thank you, Ms. Marshall. She sent me for all the elementary schools, the instructional minute calculator, which looks just like what's on board book for the two schools there. But Tavon, I looked at them all. And Tavon and Hohokam don't have recesses. They just have one 40-minute lunch for elementary.
Do you have those, Michelle? Do you have the
I
spreadsheet?
can.
I don't have the entire spreadsheet for the entire district here.
I can send them. Are you what you sent me?
Do you wanna-
Carol, do you have it with you?
I'm sorry, Board Member Kirby, Tavon and
Hohokam,
Hohokam?
yeah.
Okay.
You can? Okay.
We asked the exact same thing to the principals because we didn't think that that would be feasible in a K through 5 or K-8 school. And they did reply, no, we do not have extra recesses. We re-verified, are you really telling me for sure that you do not have extra recesses? Because we are building these calculators based off of exactly what information you are giving us. And we were given that exact information, that they do not have the extra recesses.
So their only recess is tied to lunch,
Correct.
till next year.
Okay, thank you. Because of their state law now.
Correct. State law goes
right.
into effect through second grade next year. Is that,
I
you
would have
remember?
to look that
The
up.
recess, required recess,
For
and then the following year goes to older kids.
Right. So thank you for, and I know I was personally pushing and pushing and pushing for these instructional minute calculators for the elementary schools. And, you know, I would suspect we learned, since you asked, that we have two schools that don't give any recesses beyond lunch at the elementary level, which came as a surprise to me, maybe to you too. But we do need to have this kind of scrubbed data to get ready for what's coming next year as well.
And if I might add to that, I think that the importance of this became known to principals when we had this issue this spring. whereas it may not have been something that they spent a whole lot of time thinking about before. But when we were forced to actually look at numbers of minutes and numbers of hours and are we meeting state requirements, the importance of that all of a sudden came to light. And I believe that the information that Carol and her department received this spring was certainly more accurate than what they had received from the schools in the fall. And so I think that's a good thing. And as we move forward, that level of concern has been raised to the point where we can continue that into next year.
Yeah, and refine it, because, I had notes, like, for example, travel time for field trips. Is that considered instructional? I don't know.
Because they are on a field trip, it is not taken out.
Okay.
So we're good
It
with
depends
that.
on the field trip.
Right,
I mean,
and so in assemblies.
I would expect field trips to be educational.
Okay,
We would expect that.
Yes.
but is bus time
And-
considered education, instructional?
For an educational field trip, yes.
It would be.
Okay.
One of the things,
And so all I'm saying is, that's just an example, but field trips and assemblies, and the definition, recess can be included next year, correct? And lunch can be, so there's some, but I do think we can springboard off of the work that we started this year and continue to refine and continue to look at it and challenge ourselves as an organization. We're already challenging ourselves. We're 2 years into it at the middle schools and the high schools. Now we're bringing elementaries into the fold. And I would encourage us to just keep going with it and to not say, oh, well, we just had to do it for this 1 year, now we don't have to worry about it anymore.
and I know that I've had, Ms. Ibarra sitting back there, I've had several conversations with Ms. Ibarra about how we can do a better job of tracking that more accurate data from the schools, the beginning of the school year, than what I believe any of the schools have ever been used to doing
Right,
before.
right. Yeah, and this is, I mean, even our high schools weren't doing it 2 years ago,
Correct.
where it really, really matters. So, we're improving in this area. So I'm happy to see that.
Any other questions? Thank you. Board Member Beck, sorry.
I just noticed one area on the calendar on June 1st, and I think I don't know who I sent it to, but it didn't say that it was a teacher add-on day. And it did get added on, and then when it was brought up in board books, it came back how it was before.
I believe that
So-
was changed on the calendar. I know
It's
I
just
had
not on the
asked-
new calendar that we just got in board books, so that's why I brought that up.
Okay, so I
So we
wasn't
just need to
here
make sure that that's
last
on
week,
there.
so I had asked Joy to add that language.
And I think it did get added on at one
Yeah,
point,
it-
but
they-
whatever
they
came
may
up
s-
was
you may
taken
have
off. So I
gotten
didn't
the
want to
wrong one.
approve it without it on.
You're saying the
This is last day.
June
June
1.
2018, where it says last day, teachers, June 1.
You wanted to say makeup
You wanted
day.
to say
But it was,
makeup day.
I
David
had
agreed
asked.
it was going to say
Let me
makeup.
find.
No, I know
I
you
had
did
asked-
it. It's just that
Yeah,
this
I
particular
had asked Joy to
copy
add that
didn't
on.
have-
Can we just amend it to say,
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
approve it with that amendment?
Amendment.
Yeah.
Okay.
I want to clarify, today you're approving the academic calendar. You've already approved the revised work calendar.
Right. Okay.
Oh,
okay.
So maybe
did that
that's,
at your
maybe
last
that's
meeting.
why it wasn't
Right.
included.
Yeah.
Okay,
so
so
we
This is
have,
just
but we
about
still
instructional.
revised
Amend
academic calendar.
What revised?
Yeah, I thought,
The revision is just for clarification that Tonalea and Copper Ridge are going to make up their time, and those are in board book for
okay.
you.
Gotcha.
I can pull
Alright.
them up here if you'd like.
it's not all items.
okay.
It's just the
Okay,
two, it's just the two
I thought I sent
attachments,
them.
you mean, from
Alright.
Copper Ridge and Tonalea?
Those two,
That are being
right.
approved?
I'm sorry, they
Okay.
didn't come through on the email.
Not. Okay.
But yes, the instructional time, the calendar, we weren't required to add any school days for kids.
Right.
Just to make those slight adjustments for those two schools to make sure they met their time.
Oh, and that's the only action needed for that
Right.
item specifically. Okay. All right, so did we have any additional questions regarding Copper Ridge and Tonalea? All right. So I will make a motion that we approve the revised academic calendar as presented regarding Copper Ridge and Tonalea. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Board Member Kravitz. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes 5-0. Thank you. Dr. Kriegard, sorry.
And now, if I could just say that I really wanted to publicly thank Carol Forsland for her work in putting all of this information for all the schools together. It was a lot of work to fit into the ADE calculator to give you the background information, and I appreciate that work.
Thank you. Alrighty, so then that moves us on to 3C, approval of certification to Arizona Department of Education.
Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Kriegard, this letter may look familiar to you. We presented this to you before. We have updated it to reflect that Dr. Kriegard is our acting superintendent. And the letter now has all of the numbers corrected. They were reviewed by Carol Forsgren and by our outside counsel, Carrie O'Brien. And so we are asking you to approve our certification of these hours to ADE. As Dr. Nance mentioned, we are under a bit of a time crunch to get this to ADE this week. So with that, I'll take any questions and probably ask Carol to answer them.
All right, any questions? Wow. Wow, all right. Ready? I was going to say, we have hashed this a few times, so good to hear. Ready for a motion? I'm happy to make a motion that we approve the certification to Arizona Department of Education as presented. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Board Member Beckham. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes 5-0. Thank you. All right, we'll move on to our last action item, 3D. Remove Laura Smith as Self-Insurance Trust Administrator, appoint SUSD CFO as Self-Insurance Trust Administrator, and appoint SUSD Board Member as Self-Insurance Trust Trustee.
Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Kriegard, this is a little bit of housekeeping and a little bit of arm twisting. I'm looking for a volunteer from our SUSD governing board to replace Kim Hartman on the Self-Insurance Trust Board. Thank you very much for your service, Mrs. Hartman. In addition, the last time I brought this to you in June 2017, I asked you to name our then CFO, Laura Smith, as the trust administrator. Obviously, she's not our CFO any longer. I'm recommending that you name the SUSD CFO, the position, not the person, so that knowing that Dr. Virgil is unfortunately leaving us soon, that we won't need to bring it back. So I broke it out into 3 actions: removing Mrs. Smith, appointing the SUSD CFO, and appointing an SUSD governing board member as trustee. And I will let you fight it out amongst yourselves or ask any questions you might have.
All righty. Any questions first?
I had a question that I asked. I don't know if anybody was able to find it. When did, last year, after this, you have your trust meetings, was there a presentation given on the trust that gives us a current status, or what typically happens after the meetings?
You know, that's
to
a
inform us?
Great question, and probably a hint at process improvement. We don't very often report on the Self-Insurance Trust Board items. It's a meeting that tends to happen about once a year. And a lot of items are taken care of, such as approval of paying insurance premiums and things like that. But we don't have a regular time to report to the SUSD governing board on their activities. So that's a great point, and a process improvement. I think we ought to do that. We tend to have the meeting at this time of year, toward the end of the school year, so we could report in June or around this time.
I would say yes. It's never been common practice, I think, since I've been on the board to really discuss it as a board. It's not action that we take, I believe.
No, it's not action. The Self-Insurance Trust was created by the SUSD governing board, so it's an advisory board. But it would be good for us to provide you with at least an annual update on their actions.
Any additional questions or nominations?
Okay, so I have a question. So,
Rebecca?
you said that the meeting is this year, so Kim Hartman, who is our delegate right now, she will be attending this year. Is that correct?
We actually had a meeting this morning of a quorum without Mrs. Hartman. She wasn't available to come to the meeting, but we had a quorum of the board. So.
You didn't go to the one meeting?
She went to last year's meeting.
Dr. Pay.
I'm just kidding.
You should do it. You're a
This is,
numbers
well, I just signed up for another meeting, which is why I'm hesitating and hoping somebody else will step up.
Which one did
I
you
always
sign?
feel internal pressure to, of course, say, oh, I can do it, but I also need to spread the wealth, resources and knowledge. So, is there anybody else who would be interested? What are the bond oversight committee? Well, I don't know if it's official, but I'm going tonight.
When is the meeting?
It was this morning.
We just had a meeting this morning.
So it's next June.
So it's
How
next
many are
year.
there a year, and when are they?
We tend to only have one meeting a year around this time of year toward the end of the school year. Occasionally, we'll identify a need for a second meeting somehow, sometime in the
Okay.
middle of the
There we
year.
go.
I'll do it since I'll be here.
All right.
Thank you, Sandy.
Now, do we need to make that motion?
Yes,
all
you
right.
can make it, you can make 3 separate motions as I've broken it out, or you
Okay.
can try to get it all into one.
We'll
It's
get it
your
all in
choice.
one.
Okay.
All right. Do we have any additional questions regarding the CFO appointment or anything like that?
I think it's a great idea.
All right, so I'll try this. Make a motion that governing board remove Laura Smith as self-insurance trust administrator and appoint the SUSD CFO as self-insurance trust administrator, and also appoint board member Kravitz as the board member self-insurance trust trustee.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Board member Kirby, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes
Thank
5-0.
you.
No other questions or comments? Make a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Board member Kirby, a second? Board member Hartman, all in favor? Aye. All in favor to adjourn? Aye. Motion passes 5-0. I didn't hear board member Beckett. Wanted to make sure.
Group, I think.
I know.